After years of people asking me to rank the DreamWorks animation films, it's finally time to stop and rank all 39 theatrically released DreamWorks animation films from the worst to the best. But because this list is so big, I split it in two. So this is part 2 with my top 20 DreamWorks animation films. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Let me know your top 20 DreamWorks animation films. My list is not the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. Remember, this is part 2 of a 2-part series. You can check out part 1 right up here with my bottom 19 DreamWorks animation films. And let's get started. We've made it to the top 20 with Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron, a more serious animated film with little touches of history. I actually went into this one knowing very little about it. I knew it was about a horse, but I had no clue it was set 150 years ago and featured a bunch of sweet tunes from Bryan Adams. Get off of my back and into my game. The animation is quite stunning, and it's a little bit like Braveheart for horses.
That they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
So if you have any friends that are horses, you definitely want to recommend that they watch this movie. Overall, it works well enough for what it's going for, but those sweet Bryan Adams tunes do feel a little bit out of place and don't mesh with the tone all that well. Number 19, Rise of the Guardians. I went into this one knowing absolutely nothing about it. I'd never seen a trailer. I didn't know the basic premise. I'd just seen the cover art, though I'd never paid much attention to it, and I knew it starred Chris Pine. Beyond that, it was all new, and I thought it worked well enough. The big standout here is Hugh Jackman as the Easter Bunny. That was a fun twist on a character that you wouldn't expect to be this harsh and abrasive. Kind of enjoyed the adventure of it. The animation is quite good, though I didn't like the actual designs themselves for the most part, in particular for the human characters. Easter Bunny, once again, looks very cool. So all in all, a very pleasant surprise, though not necessarily a fantastic film. Next up, The Croods, A New Age, a pretty nicely constructed piece of family entertainment. Because the set of characters here is pretty small, everybody gets something distinct about them, whether it's a running gag or a character arc that's set up in the first act, developed in the middle act, and pays off at the end. Everything has a little bit of depth to it. Likewise, when it comes to the actual construction of the character dynamics, there's a lot of intertwining value sets of miscommunication, secrets that people are holding. They just made it kind of interesting, and it's wittier than I was expecting it to be going into it. Now, a lot of the themes here are a little bit familiar about certain people not accepting new ideas, kids wanting more freedom. But all in all, a fun time. Coming in at number 17 is Captain Underpants, the first epic movie. This is a bit of a tricky one for me because I don't tend to be into a bunch of potty humor, but this movie is executed rather well. Instead of relying on being gross to get a laugh, this movie actually sets up jokes with punchlines. There's something clever. It finds a spin on a situation while it is a lot of potty humor and base level stuff. They are actual jokes. Likewise, my kids are big fans of the author who writes the Captain Underpants books. They in particular like Dogman. And so we actually know some of the source material, and they did a good job of translating his style, his humor, his writing to the big screen and found a creative way to animate it. So while I might not be the target audience for this one, it does what it's going for rather well. Number 16, The Croods. Now, this is a movie that I hadn't seen until about 5 days ago, and I'd always assumed the worst of it in that it was just a bunch of dumb caveman humor. Well, technically, that is correct. It's not just dumb caveman humor.
No way!
It has a lot more heart to it than I was expecting, and actual character arcs where you see people grow throughout the course of the film in interesting ways. Now, there's no shortage of moments of people getting hit in the face with rocks, but a lot of it is actually kind of clever in the way that it plays out. So all in all, this one actually kind of impressed me a little bit. Next up is Puss in Boots, a spin-off that takes a fun character and puts him front and center, and it has a lot of the best elements of the Shrek franchise. It has a fun spin on some fairy tale elements, but because of the lead character, it feels distinct and different from the other films in the world of Shrek. It might not have the most memorable plot in and of itself, but the world and the characters are just pleasant enough that it makes for a very digestible adventure. At number 14 is Megamind, another fun concept with a great voice cast, this time with a misunderstood character that decides to turn to crime in order to find significance. He has a rivalry with the superhero and all kinds of redemptive arcs throughout the film. Plays around a lot with our concept of heroes and villains, who's good, who's bad. Our villain has a good heart, he's just misunderstood, and our hero, pretty selfish, not such a great guy, just kind of charming. Where this one loses me just a little bit, because I know a lot of you love this movie, you've kind of told me in the comment section, is that because of the nature of messing with good, evil, heroes, villains, I didn't feel like I had anyone that I was really rooting for in this situation, but still overall, just a fun twist on a genre that's very popular these days. Oh yeah, it's also got a great soundtrack. It's a little bit like Hard Rock's greatest hits. Number 13, Kung Fu Panda 3. This is a set of characters and world that I love to go to, and in theory, there's a lot of potential in having Po meeting his father and going to this village of pandas. Now, because of this, our Furious 5 do get sidelined just a little bit, and definitely you can feel that they're stretching things just a little bit. Not all the magic is there like it was in the first two films, but this is just a world that I love to spend time in, and so while not as good, still a very solid film. Number 12, Over the Hedge. Of all the films on this list, this is actually the one that I have the most nostalgia for. I actually saw this one in the theater. I was a leader on a youth trip. We were supposed to go to the beach, but then it started raining. So instead of the beach, we went to go see Over the Hedge. And to the best of my knowledge, I believe this is the first DreamWorks Animation film that I saw. Of course, all of these DreamWorks Animation films have great voice casts, but because this one has Bruce Willis, William Shatner, and Steve Carell, it's catering a little bit more to me in particular. Likewise, I like the music of Ben Folds. He did the soundtrack for this film. The plot itself is a little bit familiar. A lot of these DreamWorks Animation films have lead characters who present themselves as having a skill set or knowledge, and then the truth actually comes out in the third act of the film. This is another one of those films, but for me, because of all the reasons mentioned, it's a little bit more enjoyable. Then we have Shrek. What this franchise does so well is having a clever spin on all these familiar fairy tales. It takes all the tropes and just turns them on their head from beginning to end, whether it being about the characters, the plot lines, or just the little moments in between. All of it has something witty going on. It's also a really dark comedy at certain points in time. You have her starting to sing and a bird explodes, and then it cuts to them eating the dead bird's eggs. Now, I know Shrek is an absolute classic for many of you that grew up watching this film, so me not even having it in the top 10 is probably sacrilegious to you. Just keep in mind, this movie came out after I'd graduated from high school.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
And so keep that in mind with my placement. I'm not throwing any shade. It's just not one of my favorites. Bringing us into the top 10 is How to Train Your Dragon 2, the Empire Strikes Back of the Dragons trilogy. The stakes are higher, the action is bigger, we have big revelations about parents, and whether you're talking about the death of a specific character or the turning of Toothless, this is easily the darkest of the three How to Train Your Dragons films. But by going to kind of new places with the family dynamics, it manages to keep the emotional resonance without feeling like it's rehashing what came before. Now, while this is my least favorite of the How to Train Your Dragons films, that's simply because it's a little bit too dark for my taste. It's still a fantastic film. There's just a lot of competition in the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy. Number 9, Chicken Run. This one is 1 part Great Escape, 1 part The Music Man, all with plenty of chickens, wit, and wordplay. I'd mentioned before on the Aardman films that the stories that they choose to tell don't tend to appeal to me, and this would be the exception. They had an interesting story with all of their cleverness, and so this is the one for me that actually appealed to me. Adding to that, it has a number of pop culture references, in particular ones that tied to Mel Gibson, the lead character, that worked for me, and they weren't overdone like they were done with Shark Tale. So all in all, a great piece of family entertainment. Next up, The Prince of Egypt, possibly the most mature film on this entire list, and it does a really good job of condensing the story of Exodus into an hour and 40 minutes. And while it doesn't water down some of the more dramatic and traumatic elements of the story of Exodus, it's done in a way that can still be appealing to children. There's certainly plenty of creative license taken and adaptation with the story, but it makes for a compelling narrative with stunning animation and characters in relationships that you actually care about. Number 7, Shrek 2. This film takes the foundation of the original and builds upon it, and because of that, it's a sequel that's even better than the original. Some of that is that there's some great new characters here, with Puss in Boots being added into the mix and a better villain with Prince Charming. Some of that is that they were just on a creative hot streak going into this film, so all the wit, cleverness is still there, but without the constraints of having to establish all the characters, it can just tell a better story with better jokes, and this is one of the examples of a sequel better than the original. At number 6, Abominable. This is a movie that I went into with absolutely no expectations and was kind of blown away by it. At its core, it has so much heart and finds all these interesting and unique ways to tell its story. A big part of that is its use of music and sound design that I just find captivating. Even its use of Coldplay songs works in the context of this movie. I love the use of music and sound in this film. And on a plot level, there's several twists and turns all along the way that I found to be effective, so I really enjoyed this film. In 5th place is Mr. Peabody and Sherman, an energetic film with a nice mix of time travel, history, wordplay, and chaos. But at its core, the story is all about the relationship between a father and a son. Granted, the father is a dog. The film has a huge bag of comedic tricks, from lots of dad jokes and puns to classic irony to even some potty humor, but always with a punchline. Likewise, the movie's action is actually handled really nicely, from the choreography and some of the fights to the fact that the camera's always moving. It's visceral and dynamic, while of course being very cartoony. The movie is jam-packed with earned conflict that just keeps compounding. Every time they try and fix one problem, it sets up the next problem, and all of this is before time travel gets involved, where it gets really complicated. All in all, I really, really like this movie, and I feel it's greatly underappreciated. In fourth place is Kung Fu Panda. This movie takes what is a very silly premise about a panda doing kung fu and handles it in a pretty serious manner. While it does have all the silly and goofy jokes that the premise requires, it also dives into parent relationships, identity, jealousy on a level that's much more mature than you would ever expect from a movie about animals doing martial arts. Beyond that, the gags work and the action is handled really nicely. When you put it all together, it's a great little film that's funny, heartfelt, and exciting. Real quick before I give you my top 3 favorite DreamWorks animation films, be sure to share your list of your top 20 favorites down below in the comment section. My list is not the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. Also remember, this is part 2 of a 2-part series, and you can check out part 1 right up here when this video is over. In third place, How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World, a great conclusion to a great trilogy. What this movie does so well is show the characters from the first film actually grow up. It's the natural evolution and progression of where these characters would be in light of the events of the previous films. Along those same lines, I think that this movie has the strongest villain. He's conniving, and he gives our characters a new type of challenge in trying to have to outwit him. Toothless gets his own little romance in the film. We get to expand the mythology and see this hidden world where Toothless belongs. And just in general, it closes out the franchise in such a satisfying way by the time you get to that final sequence. So few trilogies can fully land the ship without a bad movie and feeling right when you get to the end, and this movie did that. Our runner-up, Kung Fu Panda 2. Much like Shrek 2, it builds on the foundation of its great predecessor. The first film established a great set of characters and gave us the first bit of the origin story, so now with the second film, we can just go on an exciting new adventure. But what this sequel manages to do so well is it finds new angles to explore Poe's background, and in doing so, gives him a more emotional connection to the film's villain. We learn more things about Poe and his family, and you really care about what is going down in the third act of this film. I also enjoyed that in this film, Poe is one of the Furious Five. He's a part of the team. They're not looking down on him anymore. So you have this sense of camaraderie in the film. There's a bunch of new characters that are great additions, voiced by a bunch of fun little people to show up in a film like this. This is a film I'd never seen before about 7 months ago, and I absolutely loved it. But coming in at number 1 is How to Train Your Dragon. Superficially speaking, it's a story about a boy and his pet dragon, but it's so much more than that. It tackles the relationship between fathers and sons, societal expectations, and more. And when you put all these pieces together, it packs an emotional punch. The story hinges on the fact that you have to buy into this contentious relationship between a father and son, as well as this boy finding friendship in his pet dragon, and both of those stories absolutely resonate. But what solidifies this movie as number 1 for me is Stoich's character arc as this father that does not understand his son, and then he goes throughout this journey of discovery and realizes that he was wrong all along. And so we get to the third act, and without blinking, jumps into the water to free Toothless. It's remarkably profound and poignant for a movie that my 6-year-old daughter loves. And the moment where he apologizes to his son is probably my favorite moment in all of the DreamWorks animation films.
Pick up! I'm sorry. for everything.
And the icing on top of the cake is the score, which is absolutely phenomenal. A whole bunch of the Dreamworks Animation films have fantastic scores. There's a lot of competition here, and the best of the bunch is the How to Train Your Dragons films. All in all, the director put together a world that you want to explore with these characters, and it tells a captivating and moving story. So it comes in at number 1. I sure hope you've enjoyed this 2-part series ranking all 39 Dreamworks Animation films. If you want to see me go more in depth with some of these films, check out that playlist right over there where I've ranked these franchises and gone into more detail talking about them. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.